Okay, I'm going to check to see if everybody can hear, and I'm going to turn my volume up. I had a couple of people tell me they couldn't hear me last time. This is to make up the session that was marred by all those technical problems yesterday, and I want to apologize to you again. It wasn't my fault. It's not something I control over, but we did get with the folks over in ISS and in instructional support, and hopefully things are resolved. There are some posts in there now on how to log in to get to the VMware, to get to the Microsoft Office products when you're in the lab. So that should help settle it. The other issue is they showed me how to get hooked up to the trunk line, so I don't have to rely upon the Wi-Fi, which was just sketchy at best. So hopefully, next Tuesday things will go smoothly. But we stopped after 35 minutes, and I was pretty frustrated, and I can tell that all of you were, and I deeply apologize. But I promised you I would make this session up, and I'm going to. And so I want to start again with just kind of an overview of where we've been. What we did is we used the Rockoff text, that's that text on Microsoft Access, as a way to introduce you to the notion or the concept of a data warehouse. Okay. Now let me explain why that term kind of came about. Early on, when databases were developed, we had to use programming language that would literally say, okay, here's where the data are physically stored on the machine. Okay, and you've had BTEC, if you've had the BISS 1103, you understand that computer memory, that there is permanent memory on a computer, and that's memory that's physically stored in the addresses, okay, in the machine. Physically, there's the data are stored there. That's why you have a motherboard, why you have a storage chip, etc. Now, in order early on to utilize databases, we had to use what we called pointers. So we would physically access data, we'd run a query, and we'd take data that was in the table we had worked with, and we'd create a brand new data set based on the query. When things evolved to what we call object-oriented programming, what gets saved when you run a query is the code. That's it. And so unless you have the authority to go in and change a table, you just work the table, okay? And so the query is like a snapshot of, say, the Lincoln Monument. Lincoln Monument doesn't change. You might take a picture of it in the afternoon, in the morning. You might take it close up to the statue of Lincoln. You might go back to the very end of the wading pond there and take a shot of the whole thing. But the whole point is that what has really enabled us to use databases in the fullest extent possible has been the miniaturization of chips, high-speed computing, and this idea of iconic-driven, object-oriented program. Okay, all of this stuff that you see here, okay, are representations of code. Okay, and if you clicked under here now, I'm just going to do this. I'm just so you can see it. I'm just going to click inspect. Okay, and you'll see the underlying code that's here. All right. If I wanted to do web design, I'd look at that level. So I want to let you see that so you understand, and that this technology. It looks easy because people have done a tremendous amount of work. Now, the fact that we can write codes, we can use code, we can save code, gives us a great advantage. So we went through the process, and I'm going to come into that announcement, okay? And again, just reemphasize this point where we are. And you remember I gave you the uploads for the 4 access workshops. These are the workshops drawn from the Rockoff text. Access workshop number 1 was a data warehouse, okay? And all of these are over in Canvas. It was a warehouse, data warehouse, okay? A data warehouse can be one database that you just harvest the tables all the time, or it can be multiple databases that are tied together. Now, when you've seen me talk about, and heard me talk about the analytical cube, we're usually talking about a multiple, the ability to pull data from a table, or tables scattered in all kinds of databases, to slice and dice the data, to filter it, to sort it, to find, and the term slice and dice is really correct, and to get that done. And then I talked about this, I think, yesterday. We collect, okay, then we extract, then we typically format, analyze, and present and data. Okay, and that's that process. So you'll see we have a data warehouse. Here's an Access database. Here's a sales database. There's a specialized database. And here you see these are Excel files that we use, were query results or data sets that we table query result queries or data sets that we exported into Excel. Okay, and I've emphasized that, in the author and our text emphasizes the point that when you need to do some heavy lifting in terms of computational work, or if you think it's going to be cumbersome to try to run a lot of queries, take that stuff, export it to Excel, put them in pivot tables, and do the analysis there. And so that's why he has that whole chapter, I think it's chapter 12, where he does nothing but talk about pivot tables, okay? So that's important to understand. So we're going to take this concept of a data warehouse, okay, to a different level, and I'm going to, and before I do that, I just want to make sure that we're on top. So I want to talk about the syllabus and what we've got going on, stuff that's due. All right, the Thursday that exam was due by the 7th. The Rockoff exam number 1. And that was over chapters 1 through 2 in the Rockoff text. Then you had the 4 access workshops, and I showed you what you were supposed to upload. And you had then a couple of exams. That's due the 14th, which would then be Thursday, the Thursday the 14th of September. Okay, and kind of keep you in the game. And then, as you can see here, we begin to work on the LD, and that means the lunches database. And lunches database are those cases out of the Patrick text, SQL fundamentals. Okay, and access workshop number 1, okay, really is covered in pages 23 through 30. Okay, and it's important for you to read that first chapter, because it does give you a chapter 1, because it does give you an idea of understanding, first of all, what is SQL, and he talks about that, okay, that it's a declarative language, okay, and then he walks you through some of the products that use SQL, structured query language. He talks about relational databases, okay, and relational databases use network to string together several databases, or within a database they will use a primary key that's embedded in another table as what we call a foreign key in order to link tables together. And he talks about the different products. He gives us a rationale for learning it. And then over pages 6, 10, 11, he talks about how data is stored in table and the notion of fields. If you've had BISS 1123 with me, you understand all this. And that a row really it represents an object and all the information about it, and row creates a record. And then he also talks about, the cell is the smallest part of the table, the primary key. And I think then important for you to see is over at page 19 in the text, where it talks about that most tables have more rows than columns. Okay, they tend to be tall because we tend to focus on a few variables. And as we went through the data workshop, data warehouse concepts, I told you that I could go into a database and I can look at the tables, I can see what they collect, and I can look at their queries, and I can tell you a lot about their business. Because ultimately, a database and a data warehouse, they are physical expressions of how the company perceives things work, usually around transactions, okay, or the collection of strategically important information. So, we were to talk about that, and Lunch's database 1, which starts in pages 23 through 30, and I want to talk about that for a minute. This textbook will use kind of an algorithm. Here's what I mean. If you go over to the text and you look at page 22, you're going to see a table at the very bottom, the 1_ employees table, okay? And then he talks about the design decisions that are made there on 23, and then he talks about the Lunch's database, okay? And so we're going to use that warehousing concept. And what will happen is we're going to see a beginning table. Then we'll have some kind of, he'll say, run this, get this type of information, tell us about the number of salesmen in a certain state, or something of that nature. A business question, okay? Which is also known as the business case for running the query. We never run a query. We never extract data from a database unless there's a purpose. That's because information technology is decision-centric, okay? It's decision-centric, and it's intended to give us data we can use to make a decision with. Well, and then the Lunch's database. Now, let's talk about those resources. And so we'll go over here to the files section, okay? And we'll take a look at it. And we're going to come down here and you're going to see the Patrick materials, okay? It's in a zip file. And I'm just kind of, messing around with it. And here it is, the Patrick materials. And I'm going to download it. And then I'm going to diminish my browser. Be careful not to log yourself, close yourself off. And you'll notice there are 3 things, okay? The Access SQL code, okay? And revisions to that code. And what it's in here is a series of zip file. This zip file has a series of text files. And then here's SQL Fun. So I'm going to take SQL Fun, I'm going to put it on my desktop, okay? And I'll make sure it's there. All right, and it's here somewhere. And then, I've got a mess on here, I need to clean it, don't I? And then I'm going to get the Access SQL, the code. All right, so I'm going to diminish this down for a minute. I'm going to find my SQL Fun wherever I stuck it. It's an Access file, and yeah, I really do need to clean this up, don't I? And then I've got the zip file for the zip file for the access code. Now I'm going to open the zip file up for just a second so you can see it. And here it is. It's code for each of the chapters. So what we're going to be doing is just essentially going through chapter by chapter and building these codes and doing using query language. Now, I'm going to open up the code for chapter 1, okay? And let's look at some of these. These queries, okay, here's the syntax. This says select everything. That's what the asterisk is all about, from the 1_ employees. So that means just get everything. You say, why couldn't I just click on the table and look at everything? You can. All right? But if you were going to write it in the code in the SQL, you'd do it like this to get everything. Now, you and I are so used to working in an iconic environment. That is, we see, there are icons, for files, stuff, stuff we click and all that. We're not, the notion of writing some code just probably doesn't appeal to us very much. But you can see, and these are, if you're to say, okay, does this mean, Dr. Harmon, I also select everything from the departments table, from the lunches table, from the foods table? Yeah. Okay. So, there's just not a whole lot there in terms of doing that work. Now, I want to find my SQL fun. And there's the code. Let me find the access file that I downloaded, or I thought I downloaded. And I go back here if I need to download it again. Somewhere on this mess I need to get cleaned up. There it is, SQL fun. Let's move that way. There's Cardinal Buddy. He made his appearance again. So I'm going to open this up, okay? And what you're going to see is a data warehouse. Now, you remember we talked about the idea of dimension tables. These are tables that just contain some variable in which we're interested, okay? Like a table of states in the United States. That would be a dimension table. Then we also have what we call fact tables. Fact tables are those that are a list, usually a list of transactions, but those are the records. And then we have what we call the data warehouse table, okay, which is a table that literally pulls from a whole bunch of dimension tables, okay, and usually executed by a query. Now, a data warehouse table differs a little bit from a fact table, and I don't want to get too arcane about this, but the two of them differ on the basis of really what we intend to do with them, okay? And we tend to use a data warehouse as a tool for making some decisions. So I don't want to get too crazy about it, but we're going to run code. And as we go through each chapter, we will run code that works with and harvests data from each of these tables. Okay? Now I'm going to go back here for just a minute. All right? And I want to make sure I've got the code. And so we get this over here. There's the access code. All right. And for number 1, he asked us to run these 3, and this is 112, okay? And as you go through the chapter, you'll see that he's going to refer to problems 112. Now, if you have your text, and you always really should, you're going to notice that we have the employees table, then the departments table. He talks about that at the top of page 26, the constants table, and then the lunches table, then the foods table. He introduces us to those tables, okay, and then finally the supplies table. and he asks us to run a query and get some results. Now, I don't have to do this, but I'm just going to show you. I'm going to click so you can see. I'm going to highlight that SQL right there, okay? And I'm going to come in here. I'm going to click on the create. Then I'm going to go to query design. I'm going to close that off. And in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a thing that says SQL. Now, the select command is already in there, but you just eliminate it. And then I'm going to cut and paste. I'll run it. And there it gives me the query. Okay? And so I'm going to call this, I'm going to save this as 1-12. Okay? And so what's going to happen each time is you're going to run the queries, or we'll run them together if we're in class together, and then rename it, and then you'll upload it. This data, you'll upload the database each time, and by numbering those queries, or if the text tells us to call them a certain thing, then I'll know that you've done it. So we're just going to be uploading this database all the time. We're just going to keep running more and more queries as they get more complicated. Now there's also a 113, so we'll close this off. And we'll pop this up here. This is a 114. And so we've selected everything from employees. And listen, don't make the mistake of trying to run several queries within the same query design box. It won't work. You have to do them one at a time. We've done the employees, so we're going to select now from the departments. Copy this, okay, and click Create, Query Design. Close that off. Go to the SQL view, paste this in, and run it. And this shows us the department code and the department names. This is basically a dimension table because department is a dimension or some attribute or some variable in which we're interested. Now, I'm going to save this as 114A because I've got another one I'm going to be running. This is 114A. And we can go down, we'll just go down. We were seeing the data set view, and we can go down to the design view, okay? And then we can certainly go down to the SQL view, and you'll see the code. So we'll close this off. So that's 114A. I'll say yes, we want to save the changes. Now, we're going to run another query, okay? And we're still working with that query, the code for 1. And we've run employees, so we're going to get lunches. Copy it. And I'm going to click Query Design, close it, go down to the SQL level, and punch in that code, and boom. And this, I'm going to save it as 1 dash, I think this is 14B. Okay. And then, you know, it's just a process of, now we'll get the foods table. Okay. And we'll run that query design. Okay. And that's going to be 114C. I'll say that as 1-14C. Okay. And again, part of this also in this first chapter was to remind you how tables are all put together. And we went through this in 1123, We did a lot of this when we did the Access workshops, okay? And so we shouldn't have to really do a whole lot of repeating, okay? And we've got that taken care of, and we have a couple of more queries to run, and we're going to select from the suppliers. So we're going to run a query and get all the data from these suppliers. Go back to the query design. Okay. Go to the SQL view, and I'm going to run it. And this would be, I think this is going to be 114D. So it'll be 1-14D. Okay. So we've got that. And then we have one last one where we run from the lunch items table. We get everything from that one underscore lunch item. So we'll click query design, close this off. And again, we're using select is the command. The asterisk says get everything from, okay, lunch, the one underscore lunch item. So we'll run it, and there it is. Now you can see this query, and we're going to save this as, I'm going to save it as 1-14E. As you can see, this table, okay, that uses the, I think, let's see, it tells us the lunch items. This is essentially this is a fact. We've now created, basically, that table's a fact table that just lists lunches and the supplier and the product code and the quantity. So we've done those queries, and we'll close this. You say, okay, where will I see these? Yes, you will. Go down to the queries, you'll see where you created your new queries. There they are, 112, 114A, B, C, and D. And then I think there's also an E in here. Let's look and see what that E is, and I click on Design View, and it says select everything from lunch items. Okay, yeah. So we've got that done. That would be Chapter 1, okay? And so I would close this, I'd close this off, all right? Save the database, okay? And I've done lunches database 1, which covers Chapter 1, all right? And you'll see some other kinds of queries here as we move through this, okay? So I'm using this like a warehouse, but it's one database, okay? So I'm gonna put myself, I'm gonna go back here for a second, and I'm gonna go to settings. And I'm gonna do the student view, okay? And I'm gonna go back here for a minute. I'm gonna find my, I'm gonna diminish this down, and I'm gonna find my database, and I'm gonna close it, okay? And it's called SQL Fun, okay? And I've run the queries, I've identified them in there, and I use the code. And so I'm going to come back into Canvas. Over here on the syllabus, of course, all that stuff's listed. I'm going to come in, and now I have done Lunches Database 1, or Chapter 1 from text number 1. That's the Patrick text. I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to submit my assignment. Find the file, and it's going to be SQL Fun. And I might, if I want to, I could put my name on it, change. You, if you have once it, with it on your desktop, you can change it around. Okay, I mean rename it. Excuse me, and then submit the assignment. It's going to take a minute to submit, and you're done. Okay, you turned it in, and you might even want to put a, you can put a comment, you can change that name, change the file name, rename it there in the desktop. I don't care. How will I know you do the work? It's pretty simple. I go through at random every submission on these. I go through and I choose some at random. Okay, it may be yours, it may be someone else, to see if you ran all the code. Now, if you don't do it, you're kind of stupid, because as we get to the end of the course, you're going to have a thing called check your understandings. I'm going to give you 9 or 10 of them to run. And so if you haven't been paying attention or anything, you're going to be in a world of hurt, because I'm going to give you some of the, they're in the textbook there, check your understanding, and you're really going to have to have run these. And this is just a matter of, we're just going to build on these queries, and it's going to get more and where they're going to get more and more complex. Okay, so I've uploaded my assignment, all right, and I'm going to diminish my screen here for just a minute, and I'm going to go back over to SQL. I'm going to go back to the access the code. All right, now I looked, this is the code for chapter 1. Okay, so now I'm going to open this back up, this zip file that has all the code, and I'm going to access code for chapter 2. Okay, in chapter 2, this covers getting information from a table, and there are, let's see, there's 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 4. Now, I won't always run all of these. Okay, there's like 18 or 19 of them in here. Sometimes they'll be in Oracle, and you have to watch that. But now, for chapter 2, you do this work. All right, and so, for example, now you'll still be working with SQL Fun. You're just going to start to run these queries, and this is 2.2, and so I'm going to pop over here for a minute, and you'll see, for example, on page 33 of the textbook, they show you the goal to get a few columns and rows from a table, and they show you at the bottom of page 33, there's the beginning table, and you see all those cells that are shaded. Those are the bits of data that we want to pull together, the bits of records, pieces of records we want to pull together, and we'll create a record called ACE. And so we have that result table. Okay? And what we're doing right here is we're going to select the employer ID, the last name, the credit limit from the employees, where the credit limit is greater than $20, and then we're going to order them by last name. Okay, and then here's another thing: we'll select all the employees. And you can do that, and that in 2.4. This is one where we're using a hard code. And what he'll do is he walks you through this. Okay, is to give you he gives you an overview of the site, and then on page 35, he shows you the task. Okay, here's the stuff we want to get. Then he'll show you the Oracle and Access SQL, okay, the code, and you'll notice the little numbers, and those are some explanations of some things. And then he shows you, this is the bottom, page 35, the beginning table and the result table, okay? And when we meet on Tuesday, we'll run through chapter 2 and probably chapter 3 as well, okay? So that you can just see it, but you should be able to have chapter 1 done already. okay? And if you would like, you can always certainly work ahead and upload the queries for chapter 2. What I'll do is I'll go through and say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're trying to use this tool, etc. Okay? So I do again want to apologize to you about the issues that we had yesterday. Before we conclude, okay, and I'm going to go back here to the modules, all right? And again, I want to remind you of the resources that are here available to you, okay? And these are, of course, I always encourage you to take a look at what's going on with a better thinking. Here's the syllabus for the course, the supplement website. These are some materials from another text. Here are the Patrick materials, and then the Rockoff files. This is the Teradata University Network, okay, and those materials. And then you've got the file for access, workshop 3, access 4, and the Lynch's database, okay. And I want to show you just, again, I like to have you take a look at some things. And I think it's apropos for this week. This is a resource, okay, that talks about using how big data were used, okay, to foreshadow housing prices and sales using Google search. This is a paper. It was written by somebody at Horton School and somebody at MIT. So this is how this, and the database, the data warehouse allows us to extract data and then that have predictive value to them. Okay, so that's one resource I would encourage you to take a look at. And we'll go back to the modules. Okay. And you'll see those resources that I have for you. I'm going to back up. And if you've had class with me, you know that I'll do this. I'll include some resources like this to look at. Okay. And I think it's up to you to look at this stuff. Now, I'm going to take us just over to the calendarization. And let's look at it. We're at this is week 3. And I had some interesting resources for you, okay? And I think I talked about these, all right? So again, I may even occasionally show you the use of a database. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to click on a new tab, and I'm going to come over to the New York Times. And I know they're going to have a ton of data a ton of examples. Here's a very practical example, okay, of tracking this hurricane's path, okay. And this will pop up, and this will show you, and this shows you the 5-day path. And folks, this is nothing more than a nap. Now, my good friend Alex Kuhang, who I've published a lot with, I told him, you're right in the bullseye, and you're going to get at least a tropical storm. And notice what you have. What you have here is a line graph superimposed on a map that's topographical with states and countries with major political subdivisions. Okay, and you can see this is just like a series and it shows you at what category that thing is. And when it hits the blue, now it's a tropical storm because it's over land. It doesn't have the fuel source, okay, which is hot water, basically, to swirl up and build up that energy that gets expelled. Okay, now this is based on predictive models, and those predictive models are data drawn from databases, data that have been collected about the storm, and then looked at past storms. And I'm sure that the National Weather Service has an algorithm, but they use tons and tons of data warehouses and strings of probably hundreds of thousands of data warehouses, and then they built an algorithm that helps them look at that most likely path. Now, I want you to notice, you see the area around it, okay? This is almost like you're saying, okay, here's the range of possibilities, okay, for this storm. And notice that it gets larger as it gets to landfall, because what happens is when it hits landfall, it becomes less, it becomes more dissipated, okay? And when it's dissipated, then its power goes down. It's because it doesn't have fuel. The fuel of a hurricane is hot water, okay? And so you can see here's an excellent use of database technology and what we can do with it, okay? So I wanted to show that. Now, also, one of the other things is, notice how we can zoom out, or then we can zoom in. And this is nothing more than doing some sorting and filtering. And that's what it's based on. Well, we got started, and you should be able to upload chapter 1. If you haven't, we talked about what you'll be doing with that. I showed you how to number the queries, okay, so that you know and you stay on track. And we'll work through some problems. We'll probably do chapter 2 and chapter 3 when we meet on Tuesday, and I'll try to show you another example. Now, this tracking map is a good one. I'm going to go back here to the times for a second. And try to find you another, here's a tremendous use of a database. What they're really doing is they're taking archival photography and comparing it, and you can see this is how developed that area was in Miami Beach in 1925. Here's Miami Beach 2017. You tell me what's going to happen, and you tell me how much more. And this helps you understand why these storms become so expensive. Okay, and so again, this is pulling data from pictures from archives and applying them. Well, I'm going to shut this off, okay, and I'm going to come back over here, and again, you should have done the Rockoff exam was due yesterday, and then and I'll go back to the syllabus part, and I'd like you to start work on Lynch's database 1, okay, and we're using SQL fun that's in that zip file like a data warehouse, because we can. And then we're going to be running, I showed you, how to run the code and all that. And then we'll work on Lynch's database 1 and then Lynch's database 2 and 3. And I won't go through every single query in the book. There are going to be times when I repeat them. And so there's really no point for doing that. Well, folks, listen. I do. Those of you who do take a look at this, this is in lieu of all the problems we had yesterday. I'm so sorry about that, but I think we've gotten them fixed and gotten them solved, and I appreciate you being there. All right, Tuesday is a virtual day, so we won't be meeting Tuesday. We'll be meeting next. We'll be meeting next Thursday. So Tuesday will be a live stream. If it's not going to be, I'll let you know if it's pre-recorded. It doesn't matter. You can go back and look at the recordings. And this is to make up for what you missed yesterday. Because remember, Tuesdays are virtual days. Then we meet on Thursdays. So this makes up for the Thursday, September 7th class. So I'm going to stop the sharing and then end the meeting and convert this thing to YouTube and let you know when it's ready. Thanks a lot and have a great weekend.